Ani Sego, Lindsey Lickers, Community Safety Liaison at ONWA here, and welcome to the rattle making video. So to start, as always, I like to lay out all the things that we're going to need just to make sure you have everything. And in your kit, you would have been given a piece of rawhide, and you would have also gotten a stick for the handle, and some sinew, a bag with some sinew, some Glover needle, some of these clips here, as well as some stones, beads, and that's to make that shaking sound for the rattle, as well as batten, similar to what we used in the drum making workshop to stuff the rawhide once you get it into shape. And additionally, you'll need either an X-Acto knife or just a really sharp pair of scissors. And alternatively, too, similar to the last workshop, I also recommend pliers to pull the needle through in case it gets a little tough sewing for your hands. And yeah, so that's what you're going to need. It also mentions to, if you can have access to a drill and a 1/16 inch drill bit, and that's really just to affix the molded rawhide to the stick and to ensure it doesn't go anywhere over time with use. If you don't have that, there are ways that you can just use glue to put it together. So when we get to that point, I'll show you both options. And so yeah, so we'll get started. So the first thing is that you'll want to do is similar to the drums, is when working with rawhide, you're going to want to soak your rawhide. So I soak my rawhide about 24 hours before I'm going to do what I'm doing. So these have been pre-soaked, and you'll notice that yours need to be cut out. So I've already gone and done that step. I've cut them out, and I've also shaped them a little bit, because when I got them, you'll probably notice that they're not exactly the same, each one of them. So you'll want to just put them together, trim off the excess, right, and shape them so that they're both even on each side. Okay. And what I did also in the meantime was I took my sinew apart. They give you a big roll of it, and you can actually take that apart, and it breaks apart into about 5 strands. So I broke mine in half, and then I used 1/2. Okay, and I also doubled it. So I have a knot. I have a knot at the end, right? And I doubled it. So there's 2, basically make it a bit thicker with the needle on the end. Okay, so that's what we're going to be using. And basically what the first step is to sew it. So you're going to sew, and we are all the way around from one end here. You do not want to sew this bottom part together, right? You don't want to sew these two together at the bottom. You're only going to be sewing from one end here all the way around, okay, to here, and then stop. And then you're going to go back the other way. And the reason why we go over it twice, is really just to ensure when the rawhide dries, that it dries close together and tight together, so that your items, whatever it is you're packing your shaker with, don't slip out, because some of them are really small, right? And another thing that I would recommend too, and again, this is all dependent on your individual journey, but I would also recommend that you maybe take some time to source some of the interior material that you're going to put in there. Traditionally, we used to gather stones. Some cultures, some nations will also use like food, for example, corn, right? Seeds, things that are hard. And the point behind that is that nation to nation, all of these things and all of these different things that go inside of our shakers are significant for different things. So myself, I'm gonna opt to not use this, only because I've been sitting on a gift for quite a bit of time. So in here, this was given to me for being Oshkabewis for a ceremony years ago, and I was given a bundle and a gift of thunderstones from Old Women's Bay. So I'm going to show you what these look like, right? So you can see they're a certain kind of stone that you can only get at Old Women's Bay in about central Ontario. And there's a whole story behind them. But I would encourage you to go and, go get out there and take a look and source your own stones, your own shaker insides, right? And so I'm going to use this one because, again, like I said, I've been sitting on these for quite a bit of time and just needing to make my rattle. So using the opportunity to, while I'm teaching you all, to make this for myself. So miigwech now. So we'll move on to beginning to sew. So you're going to notice, similar to the drum and the rawhide from that demo, there's a smooth side and there's a rough side. So you want your rough side to be the inside of the shaker. That's where the stones and whatever it is you put in there are going to hit the walls of, right? So you want to basically make a sandwich with the rough sides facing each other and your smooth sides facing outward, okay? So you make sure that's there, and you're going to start from one side. And to make it easier for you while you're sewing, they've included those little clips, those little bull clips. This is to make sure that it stays in place while you're sewing, because you don't want it sliding around, because if it slides around, then you're more likely to have holes and gaps. And for rattle making, you really want to make sure that you don't have that happen. So I'm just going to clip this in place here. Okay, just make sure it's where I want it. Yep, clip that. And then as I move around it, I can take the clips out, right? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to take my needle, my Glover needle, and caution, again, Glover needles are super, super, super sharp. So please be careful while you're using them. I've, after doing so much sewing for different things, being a crafter, I've unfortunately had the experience of putting one of those through my finger, and it is not fun. And I don't wish that on anybody. So I just want you to really be careful, okay? I'm also going to cut off a section of this rawhide. Just to act as my thimble, because you should have some extra. Okay, so that's just going to kind of go like this on my finger to help me push the needle through and protect my finger. And please excuse my rough hands. I'm, again, still battling with a really bad eczema season, so yeah, it's can't be helped. But we keep going. So, like I said, you're going to go in, you're going to start at the corner, and you're going to make sure you put your needle and your thread, and it goes through both pieces of rawhide. That's really important. So if you want to go through one first, just to make sure you get it in the right place, you can do that. Okay. And then again. And again, I'm going to use the pliers. I'm going to pull, 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 pull. Pull. And similar to when we were doing the sewing for the drumstick, I'm going to go through there just to make a bit of a loop. Okay. Then I pull. Perfect. Now, you can do the running stitch version that I did for the drum, or for the drumstick for the top. That's really up to you. Some people just do a running stitch all the way around and then go and do a running stitch all the way back. So basically you're making an X across. I'm going to do that too, but I'm also going to add the that running stitch as well. So That's really up to you, but I'll show you what it is for those of you who didn't see the other video. So I pull it all the way through, and you just leave a little bit of a loop at the end, and then you go through the loop, and then you pull, 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 pull. Okay. Don't feel too bad about like what this looks like at the end here, because you got to remember you're going to put this stick through, and this is going to eventually get covered up by extra rawhide or leather or something, because that's the base, right? You're going to cover that up eventually. I'll actually show you what it looks like, what we're making here. So this is actually what we're making. So you can see here, this end, you're not going to really see underneath of it because you're going to cover it up, right? So you can kind of see the stitching a little bit, how they did it. And I'm just going to do that extra little bit of the running stitch just to add that extra bit of security to make sure nothing slips through. Even though my rocks are bigger, so I probably don't have to worry about that too much, I'm still going to do it just for good measure. Okay, so I go down a little bit further, pull through, and I'm going to leave that loop, right? Pull. Great. So now you can kind of see what's going to happen. It's like I said before at the other video, there's going to be an extra line that goes all the way through and covers and make sure that this little gap is sealed up. So that's why I prefer that stitch, especially with working with leather, rawhide, anything like that, even with moccasin making. I really prefer that stitch because it just ensures that it's not going to come apart, or it's going to be very difficult for it to come apart. And this will just help too when it's drying. It'll just be that much more reinforced, you know? So I'm going to keep doing this over and over again, that stitch. And when I get to this side here, I'm going to keep going back the other way instead of just doing like a loose stitch, and I'll end back up where I started. And I'll see you there when we get there. Okay. Okay, so now that we have sewn up all the edges, as you can see, now we're ready to stuff the inside. So you're going to take some of the batten here that was given, you're going to just stuff that and pack it really tight. And then at the end, make sure that you insert the stick all the way through it up as far as you can. Okay? I'll meet you back there when we have that done. Okay, so now we've gotten to the point you're gonna want to make sure that all of the batten you shoved in there is really, really thick in there. Okay, and you can put in as much as you need to in order to make sure that it's keeping its shape, right? And you can kind of move it around a little bit while it's still drying. It's still a little wet, to make sure that it's in the position that you want it to be in and looking how you want it to, because when it dries, it's going to dry in that shape and it's going to hold that shape. Okay, so and don't worry if you couldn't get this all the way through, as long as you can get it as far as possible without there being too much, as long as it's not drooping, right? That's okay. And you can kind of move the batten around inside of it to put it in place. And you're going to want to just kind of leave it like this overnight until the rawhide is really thick. It should take one day and it should be okay for you to start working with it again. But if you notice that when you come back and it's still really like kind of damp to the touch, or it's still kind of flimsy, You might want to hold off on working with it, but most times it dries just overnight. And tomorrow we'll come back and we'll do the second part. Okay, you just want to make sure that it's kind of resting and it's straight, and yeah, just leave it overnight and then we can come back for round 2. Okay, welcome back. Moving on to the last part, you're going to have the top, the rawhide part of your rattle, and it should be pretty much dried now to the point where it's going to maintain its shape and it should be really hard to the touch. And when you knock on it, it should be making pretty thick sound. And what you're going to want to do is make sure that you put out all of the batten that you put in there. I had to use some tweezers, some pliers, whatever you have around the house that'll help you get it all out. You really want to make sure you have it out of there because you don't want it to have an impact on the sound. And you're going to want to take your stick and you're going to notice that it's shaved on one side there, and you want to just put it together. Make sure that it's fitting snug so that when you start to shake it, it's not going to fly off. You want it to be really snug. And you want it to go up to at least halfway up that bottom portion. And I'm going to try to put it right to the base, just to ensure that it has extra hold over time. So what I also would recommend you get is some glue. I have here some E6000. I just have that because I'm a beater and I use this all the time. It's dries clear, but it's also industrial strength. So super glue, industrial strength, something like that would work best. It's going to make sure that it has a long-term hold. Just be really careful. You don't want to get this on your hands because it's really hard to get off. And it can be a bit of a bummer if you do end up doing that. I also soaked some of the extra rawhide lacing I had from the drums. And that is just an option that you can do if you had some extra, and you can actually wrap it around when you put the two together just to hide some of the sewing and hide the bottom right around that edge when you put it together. And it just kind of helps you to make sure it keeps it together more. So that plus the glue will be really good. I also have my shaking material. I was gifted these rocks from Old Women's Bay for being Oshkabewis at a ceremony, and you have some in your kit. But like I mentioned, if you can harvest your own or you go out and seek your own, of course, always giving tobacco for that would be great. And you're going to want to just stick them into the empty shaker top. Okay, and you want to make sure that you're always keeping the rocks on the bottom, but you can shake it around and you can hear that's what it's going to sound like. So you can add it to your preference of what you want it to sound like, but you definitely want to make sure to keep it on the bottom, right? Especially while it's drying when you put the glue in, because you don't want any of the rocks or the shaky material to get stuck in the glue. But you're going to put glue just at the top, where the stick and the rawhide itself are going to make contact, always making sure to keep the rocks on the bottom. Okay, so it's really important just to remember to keep that hole facing upward. So we're going to take some of this glue, unwrap this. Again, just be careful if you're using industrial strength glue because it's very easily to adhere to things. And you want to just put it on the inside like I showed you, just on the top piece there. You don't need to go too crazy with industrial glue. A small amount will work, but you do want to make sure that you make you have a good amount in there to make contact and adhere to the wood, right? So I'm just going to, put it around the top edge. Make sure that's enough. Make sure it's getting spread out. Okay. Make sure to put the top on there. And we're going to put the stick and slide it into, again, remember, as far in as you want, at least halfway up that top piece. Okay, you want to stick it in there, and you're going to start to see that the glue itself is starting to spread. That's what you want to see. So you can kind of tell where it's stopping. And again, remember to keep the stones or the shaker material on the bottom, right? So you want to put it in there. And you can kind of see that's where the shaker stick is stopping, is right where I want it. And you can see it from the discoloration in the rawhide. And I'm just going to lean it there, lean it on something. So again, the shaking material is going to stay at the bottom, not make any contact with the glue. I'm actually going to get this, it's a bit higher of an angle, right? You want to make sure you have an angle. And this is when you can take your rawhide, if you plan to do that. You know, you just pull it apart, make sure you have it at about halfway on each side. I'm going to just, you know, cut mine down because there's a lot of extra rawhide that was left over. I don't need that much. Just showing you this is about how much you would need. And you just start just a little bit up near the top there. And you just kind of tie a little knot. And this is where you're going to want, again, pull really tight, because rawhide that's wet, you know, it's gonna dry, and it's gonna dry a lot. It's gonna shrink a little bit, and you can really just go all the way down and cover up that whole bottom part. That's really your preference. The other thing you can do is you can get some leather, and you can do the same thing as this. And you can put a little dab of glue underneath of it, and that just makes sure that it stays in place, and it covers up, you know, the bottom of your sewing, and it just makes it visually more appealing. But again, this is your rattle, right? You do things how you want to do them. If this is what you would like to do, you can definitely do that. If you like the more natural look of leather, you can do that. But mainly the whole thing is we're trying to cover up, you know, that bottom seam, and really just make sure that we add extra, you know, strength to it so that it doesn't fly out over time, right? We want to make sure these are going to get a lot of use, you know, whether you take them to ceremony or you're singing with them, especially if you take them into lodge, they're going to get beat up a little bit. So you want to make sure you're doing what you can to make, you know, to ensure that you're going to have this shaker for a long time. But that's pretty much it. It's really up to you which way you decide. And you're going to want to have this sit for at least a day, and you can check it again and it should be good to go.